going to get started? All right, well thank you everybody for coming in today. I know everybody's having a great time downstairs, lots of great activities, lots of great panels. Did anybody get to see the Defenders? Anybody? Didn't want to stand in that long line? It's okay, we'll catch them on Netflix whenever we want, because that's the power of Netflix. We can see shows at our fingertips anyways. But we're not here about Netflix's Defenders. We are here today to talk about how to create a comic presented by Comic Indie. My name is Kenneth. I'm a proud member of the Comic Indie group. And basically today we want to share some of our knowledge from some of our expert artists who do have works already in print, whether they be digital or actually in the comic book format. You can stop by booth 3000, that's 3000 downstairs, to check out a lot of the great art and books that are available. But we want to kind of share that knowledge with you. Just a little bit about myself. I joined the group about 2 years ago, wanting to do the very same thing that you guys are here to. Hopefully, if you're interested in creating your own book, just did not know how until I met this man to the right of me. We're friends, not partners, but technically partners, right? That's the thing we can say?
You can say that.
Okay, we can say that. So without further ado, before we jump into our expert artists that will be sharing their knowledge with you, I would like to introduce you to Alex AYALA with Comic Indie, and he'll share some knowledge about the group. Here you go, Alex.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, maybe too loud.
Booming, boys.
Everybody have a good lunch?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm Alex AYALA. I am the founder for Comic Indie. Comic Indie. Whenever I mention this group to some of my friends or family members, sometimes I'm met with some confusion. I get a raised eyebrow and I'm like, well, what is Comic Indie? It's a good question. We all have different backgrounds here. We all have different styles, different genres. This actually started 2 years ago as just a social gathering of like-minded individuals, creators, who wanted to get to know other artists like themselves. And a lot of us hadn't even started a comic book endeavor, so to speak. But, as these meetings kept progressing, there was this source of inspiration, motivation, and there was even this knowledge process that, even though we had different styles and genres, we were able to share what some of those processes were. And all this was a good thing because, eventually down the line, a lot of us started to push pencil to the paper, and we started to get comics done. And, either whether it be web publishing or even self-published. Even though all these comics started getting done, though, there was a roadblock. Can anybody here guess what that roadblock can be?
No publicity.
No.
Perfect. Self-promotion. And as it turns out, it can take about several years for one creator to get the following that he needs. And that's very important because if you don't have that following, if you ever consider churning a profit from this, then you're going to need that following. But what if that one creator wasn't alone? See, another problem is that sometimes you get creators that are either too focused on their work or they're not that good with self-promotion, or they just don't want to focus on that side. But what if that one creator wasn't alone? What if you had a whole band of indie comic creators together running as one group? And that's essentially what we are. A lot of us do focus on different types of promotions. So we have our YouTube shows, we have a blog, we have a podcast, and we even try establishing relationships with people in the comic community. So suddenly all this becomes a greater force for the single indie comic creator. That means that this small guy, who may even be a novice, will start bringing in attention for himself at a much faster pace. So that's essentially what the group is about, and our mission is to bring that spotlight on the local indie comic creator, specifically now in Houston, and make that spotlight brighter. So thank you guys for showing up, and without further ado, here's Kenneth.
That's a sign, Alex. That's a sign that you're talking too long is what happens. So without further ado, this is why you all came here to learn some knowledge. So we're going to go and pass it off to JP, the creator of a web series called Mateys. Think about this. You got a pirate, you got a ninja, they're roommates, and the hilarity ensued. So there's a pamphlet going around with, it's like a little magazine. Check out those Mateys ones. There's one about sushi that is freaking hilarious. So with that being said, JP, creator of Mateys.
Thank you. All right. It all starts with an idea. So I would think that a lot of you guys already have great ideas for comics, and that's why you're here. So we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the whole process. I'm going to take a little bit of time talking about, the startup process. Jay is going to talk about scripting and about the artwork. So we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to bring up about 5 different points to talk about. In the very beginning, you should nail down a genre and an art style. When you do this, it will help whoever the reader is, or if you're going to collaborate with someone, to see if they are interested in either reading or doing the artwork for it. So you need to kind of figure out and nail down a genre. And a genre is basically saying your comic is going to be a comedy, a drama, fantasy, horror, romance, science fiction. So your story could have maybe all these different elements in your comic, but you kind of need to nail down maybe 1, 2, 3, kind of to encapsulate what your comic is. And then the next thing is you need to select an art style. And it's either can be cartoon, realistic, manga, stick, 3D. So you can again communicate that with other individuals to see if they're interested in doing the artwork or really reading your comic. So after you have those 2 things, you should probably do some world building. You need to describe your story setting, have that in mind. What time period does your comic take place in? What environmental factors are there out there? Is it a dystopian future wasteland with zombies running around? Does it have vampires that glitter in the sun? Which you really should not have vampires glitter in the sunlight. So create that. And once you have your world, you create characters for that world. The primary and secondary characters, and this topic can go for a long time, but basically you make characters who have a history, kind of go into describing their personality, so when you write your story, you can be consistent. I know for me, I'm kind of into psychology, and I like the Myers-Briggs kind of thing, kind of figuring out if character is introverted or extroverted, and I kind of write that. And then be sure to have some flaws with your character. You don't want to write a character who's so perfect and can do everything, and the reader will just find that very unrealistic. And then also, you should think about how your character is going to evolve throughout the story with character development. The next point is create an outline for yourself. Know where the story is going and how it will end. This way, your story will have focus. You'll have an opportunity to add foreshadowing, and you'll reduce the chances of having to redo your comic whenever you're producing pages. Personally, I'm more into webcomics, and there's been a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but several times where I've followed a webcomic and 50 pages in, I love the artwork, but the story's all over the place. And then come to find out the author kind of wrote himself into a corner, or has to reboot and restart the whole comic. And there's been some times where they rebooted like 2 or 3 times, and after a certain degree, it's like, I love the artwork and the author, but I'm not going through that anymore. I mean, it's frustrating for the reader to follow it and then just be disappointed where you don't get any resolution and having to read more pages again. So please, think about creating the outline for yourself. And then next step is to select a medium. Are you going to go with digital or are you going to go with print? There's different characteristics that you got to consider whenever you're selecting your medium. For digital, you would want to use RGB color format. That's red, green, blue. It looks better on a computer screen. Your comic should be between 600 and 800 pixels. And what that's good for is that you don't want a viewer having to scroll left and right for each page. It's very frustrating for someone to do that, having to read a webcomic. And it's also becoming more popular to have your panels like go up and down to scroll. So that's becoming more common with the webcomic versions. And there's a couple different formats that you would save your comics in. JPEG is a common file type that you would save, and that is a file type that's kind of larger than a PNG, but it's good for, I guess, things that have different gradients. And a PNG is a more compact file, and that's the one I use for Mateys. It's good whenever there's like colors that are drastic change and don't have gradients, and it's a smaller file type, and you can revise it and it doesn't lose, I guess, clarity. And the last one is GIF, which is not as popular. It takes a lot of space, but you can do like little animations with it. So if your webcomic has animations, then you would use a GIF. And then if you're going to do print, you want to use CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black. And that's what most printers would want to use whenever they print out their comic. You want to use at least 300 DPI, which are dots per inch. And and if you're doing a comic, you probably want to have the page length 22 to 25 pages in length, because that's about how much a comic book length is. So now that I've gone over that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake, who's going to talk about scripting and the artwork.
Hi everyone.
Whoa!
I don't know which microphone is on. I'm Jay with Comic Indie. I want to welcome all you guys here. Mainly we hold most of the questions until the very end. We're going to have a robust Q&A if anyone has questions. First thing I want to mention is a lot of thanks to everybody, the guys at Comic Indie. It's great being part of this group. We're all supporters of indie comic developers, and that's kind of what we're doing here today. Is if anyone has questions like, okay, I want to create my own book, what do I need to do? That's what we're here for. So that's what we want to help out with today. So what I'm going to go over, I'll start with it. JP's basically covered writing and getting your idea together in order to collect everything together as an outline or as a synopsis, so you have a basis which to start with. But I want to mention though, if you do have a good complete synopsis, you can get a copyright on that. Just go to the government website for copywriting and you can secure that if that's a concern. So really what comes after that phase when you're ready, say you put together your team, you're the writer, you've got your artist, you're ready to start really working on the development phase for your comic. So what you want to do is script every page. And you really want to script it by panel. You want to be able to tell your artist team, you know, what exactly is happening on every page along with dialogue. So your description should be panel by panel. And I'll go ahead and I'll show you an example of what I've been working on lately with my own scripts. I wish there was a better way to zoom in on this. Let's see if I can do this.
Control and middle mouse button. Up and down.
Thank you, Sharky. Okay, well, what you see here is just the title, then you go into this page one, pick one, and you really want to be descriptive here and think of it in terms of like your artist really doesn't know what you're writing about, what kind of scene you have in your head. So this is your opportunity to communicate as much information as you can to the artist who will be working on every single panel, every single page. And you know, they'll always be creative to some degree, but you want to give them as much to go on as you can, because that really will help them actually add to the creative. So this is a very simple, if you use Google Docs, which my friend Chet recently turned me on to, depending on how you format the page, if you use all caps, it creates an actual sort of guide on the left. You can just click and skip to whichever page you'd like to skip to very quickly, very easily. So Google Docs really helps a lot. It's great for sharing. So once you have your script set up and your artist is ready to begin work, there's a lot to think about before you just dive in and start creating pages. One of the first things you're going to be concerned about is the size of the panels and the pages that you're working on. It's basically proportionate to 11 by 17. The art page sizes are usually 10 by 15. So if you went to an art supply store, you got some Bristol board to start your pencils, starting with maybe a 12 by 18 pad, and then I think they actually sell some pads that are made just for comic art, so if you find those, they probably already have blue lines set up to the correct size for you. But you can actually measure it out yourself. And the couple of key things that you want to keep in mind is that you're going to have artwork that should stay within a live area, and it may go beyond that and actually spill past the edges of the page, and that would be your bleed. And these are terminologies for the printer, that when it comes time to actually fold the book, the pages are not going to line up exactly right, but they trim them all. So you want to leave about 1/8 of an inch edge all the way around every single page so that the artwork can bleed off the edges. So a good example of a setup for your pages. And this is actually a Facebook link to Eric Larson, I believe it is. This is a really great example of a one-page setup. The dashed line inside is your live area, and then you can see where it's labeled non-bleed. I don't know if you can read that, but the big yellow box in the center, that's your live area. Then the red line around the outside at the top is where the printer is going to trim it. So the outer yellow bar around the page, that's your bleed. So your artwork can, if you plan ahead, your artwork can go beyond that trim line, just to make sure if you want your artwork to be trimmed out and flow to the edge of the page. And that's mainly what that setup is for. So, now you can keep in mind whether you want to do this by hand or do it digitally. Either way is a possibility for you. It's probably going to be too faint for you to see here, but I actually have it on my pages. I go ahead and establish where those live area marks and bleeds are, so that as the artwork is being developed, I can see exactly where the edges of the page will be. So, I'm going to walk around this one. Can't really see from here, but as I'm working on the artwork, I'll just try it one time. So here's where I know this is where the live area ends. That's actually where the edge of the boxes are actually designed where to go. The spine of the book is here, and I make sure I'm within 1/2 inch for the live area, so that if there's any important elements of the artwork, like I don't mind her shoulder going just slightly beyond the edge of that live area, but anything else that's important, someone's face, if their hand is important to the frame, if there's any text or conversation that's going on, a word bubble of any kind, you don't want that going beyond the edge. This live area is your protected art space where you can play. That's your sandbox. And then once you get beyond here, you have to expect that any shift in the printer, as the pages run through the press super fast, if there's any sliding back and forth, this is a danger zone, but you're generally pretty safe. And this edge right here, I'm making sure that these backgrounds are going beyond, because I want them to bleed to the edge. So those backgrounds I know go 1/8 of an inch off the edge, and it will get trimmed at the time that the printer's does their job. So that's general page layout. You definitely can start by doing roughs for the page. So these, let me see if I can make that darker. About 8%. So this is a great way to just, before you dive into, the actual full page layout, you dive into any hard or finished art, that you're going to lay this out and, establish your frames. This is where you look at the script and you see what the artist has written and what, how they want the story to flow, kind of the direction they're giving in that document. And you would lay it out like this. You could probably get even more finished than this. This is my own rough for myself. But you might get a little bit more detail when you submit it to the writer, so that they can see what's going on and kind of what you have in mind for the final page to be. So it's pretty much where you want to start. And when you're working in this stage, make sure that you have your live area, your bleed and trim. All of these documents are at 300 dpi at least. Let's see, let's pull up the page parameters. So we have, so it's 21 by 17 at 300 dots per inch. That's pretty small. I usually something I kind of skipped over is I usually always work in spreads. I just imagine as the person is reading the book that as they open the pages, they're reading from one page to the next. It actually helps me to kind of plot it out a little better and to leave a little bit of a teaser frame at the end of that, whole sequence, so that they, get a little bit more surprise on the turn of the page, as they would. This last frame at the bottom right is a teaser for what's on the next page. So a lot of it is really a lot of planning ahead and being mindful of what the mechanicals that the printer is going to need from you. That's going to be ultimately very important. If the printer has got the wrong size, the pages are set up incorrectly, you'll go back and forth with the printer and have to go through a lot of learning experience to get it right for them. So, all of this text that's up here at the top, I know all that's going to be cut away. It's just there for my reference. And your pages will come out looking, when they're trimmed, a little bit more like this. So these are adjusted more for web publishing, but it is trimmed right to where the bleed would be when it goes to the printer. And that's pretty much what I wanted to cover as far as what the mechanicals that you need to know to set up your comic for a printer. You can, whether it's done in black and white or color, pretty much all the same rules apply. Black and white is a one color print option. Color will be a CMYK option. You can do that digitally or on a 4-color press. Up to you, it's your choice. There are a couple of things to keep in mind when you're doing some page layout as far as the art is concerned. Eric Larson's post here on Facebook really addresses a lot of that. So I'll just transition over to some things to keep in mind when you're working on your layouts. This actually looks like it's a 2-page spread, but it isn't. Those backgrounds do not mesh. You're supposed to read down the page and read the panels on the bottom, and then start again on the next page, and it looks like they go across, and they don't. That's something that confuses the reader. It's one of the things to definitely keep in mind that you don't want to do. here is his comment on this was mainly he's criticizing himself, and he's like, that jerk artist just got carried away. There's too much processing on the face of the character, making him look older than necessary. One of the green character on the left is too much processing versus on the right. Let's see what else we got. Okay, this is something that he talks about a lot, but it's going to be, unless I can zoom in, a little harder for you guys to see. It's not going to be. But on the very bottom frame, maybe there's a better example. There is a foreground character laying on the ground reaching a bullseye, and Daredevil is hopping over a ring, but Daredevil is coming out of the frame in the background, while the foreground character is not coming out of the frame. And that actually, it causes kind of an illusion, making you think that maybe Daredevil is just, he's more in the foreground because he's coming out of the frame, makes him look tiny next to Bullseye. That's not really what the artist is going for there, but you never want anyone who's in the background to penetrate the foreground or come out of the frame unnecessarily. It's kind of another example of it here. Let's see. This is one where what you want to avoid is having, cross too many different frames, or possibly the foot of the character is actually kicking somebody or kicking something. So it's pretty dynamic, but you want to make sure that the fist right here doesn't look like it's slamming down on the body underneath it. It's just layout stuff to be conscious of. Let's see what else I can find. Don't remember his comments on this page. This is where probably JP would have a lot to say about this page layout, because this is where the artist is, maybe the writer, the scripter, and the artist were not exactly communicating about what should happen on the frames, because there's really a lot of space on that first frame. There's a lot of scripting, a lot of text, a lot of copy, but it all winds up being wedged in at the bottom. You have these forced word bubbles in the frame at the bottom. It's another thing to just avoid and be mindful of the space that you're using. This kind of rough to communicate with the artist, like, is this going to work for the amount of scripting that we have? That's a good practice to communicate with your writer about. Let's see. The other thing to think about is kind of right to left sequence. So what you have is Superman is coming in from left to right. Next frame he's left to right with Lex Luthor. Then the frame right below it, the third one, he's actually flipped the other way, right to left. So you just, for consistency, you want to keep everything, if you start left to right, keep it left to right. It just works better for the flow and keeping the reader on pace with what's going on in each frame. He actually complements this page, likes it a lot. Anyway, these are just some of the examples to keep in mind. So here's another thing. This is kind of important. So when you're the letterer and you're, how do I make these guys communicate? Who's speaking first based on the space on the frame? What you don't want are the crossing swords, as he calls it. It's those two word bubbles on the top frame where the lines of speech to that character are actually crossing with the other one. That's another item to avoid. Another thing to keep in mind. So, 5 panels on the left like this. You have to be very careful if you're stacking panels like that the copy is reading correctly from one frame to the next frame. As you don't want the reader to have to guess or get lost